Abandoned kitten rescued by dog. What happens next is unforgettable. How will this story unfold? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. The day began like any other in the quiet countryside. Birds chirped in harmony, the sunlight filtered through the trees, and life seemed to flow effortlessly. However, for a small, fragile kitten huddled behind a pile of discarded trash near an old barn, the world was a harsh and unforgiving place. The tiny creature, with matted fur and a pleading gaze, had been abandoned, left to fend for itself in a world too big and too cruel. The kitten mewed weakly, its tiny voice barely audible against the gentle rustle of leaves. It hadn't eaten in days, and the gnawing hunger in its stomach was unbearable. Its paws were scratched from wandering over rough surfaces, searching desperately for food or shelter. Fear lingered in its wide, innocent eyes as it shivered in the morning chill. It didn't know why it had been abandoned, nor did it understand the dangers lurking around it. But it did know one thing: it was alone. Not far from where the kitten lay was Max, a kind-hearted dog with a streak of curiosity. Max was a mix of breeds, part shepherd, part retriever, with a warm coat of golden brown fur and an ever-wagging tail. He lived on a nearby farm with his owner, an elderly man named Walter, who had a reputation for rescuing animals in need. Max had grown up surrounded by chickens, goats, and even the occasional stray that Walter brought home, so he had a natural inclination to care for others. That morning, as Max roamed the edges of the farm, his sharp nose caught a faint, unfamiliar scent. His ears perked up, and he sniffed the air intently. Something or someone was nearby. Driven by his curiosity, Max trotted toward the source of the scent. As he approached the barn, his steps slowed. His keen senses picked up the faint sound of mewing, barely audible but enough to tug at his instincts. Turning a corner, Max found the kitten. The sight of the trembling little creature stopped him in his tracks. The kitten was so small and frail that it looked like it might vanish if the wind blew too hard. Max tilted his head, his soft brown eyes filled with concern. Slowly, he inched closer, careful not to startle the kitten. The kitten, sensing Max's presence, looked up. Its first instinct was fear. It recoiled, pressing itself against the cold ground, its tiny body tense with apprehension. But Max didn't move aggressively. Instead, he lay down a short distance away, his posture relaxed and non-threatening. He let out a low, friendly whine, as if to say, "I'm not here to hurt you." The kitten's wide eyes studied Max cautiously. It had never encountered a dog before, and its instincts told it to be wary. But there was something calming about Max's presence. His warm eyes and gentle demeanor made the kitten's fear waver. After a moment of hesitation, the kitten let out a small, hesitant mew. Encouraged by the sound, Max inched closer, his tail wagging slowly. He nudged a piece of dry grass toward the kitten with his nose, as if offering it a toy. The kitten blinked, its fear giving way to curiosity. Slowly, it extended a tiny paw toward the grass, batting at it weakly. Max barked softly in encouragement, his tail wagging a little faster now. This simple interaction was the beginning of an unexpected bond. Max lay beside the kitten, offering his warmth and protection. The kitten, though still wary, began to relax in his presence. For the first time in days, it didn't feel completely alone. After a while, Max decided it was time to bring the kitten back to the farm. Rising to his feet, he nudged the kitten gently, urging it to follow him. The kitten hesitated at first, its small body trembling as it tried to stand. But Max's encouragement gave it the strength to take a few shaky steps. The journey back to the farm was slow. The kitten struggled to keep up with Max's longer strides, its tiny legs barely able to carry it forward. Sensing this, Max stopped and crouched down, signaling for the kitten to climb onto his back. The kitten blinked in confusion but eventually understood. With a bit of effort, it clambered onto Max's broad back, its tiny claws gripping his fur. Max carried the kitten the rest of the way, moving carefully to avoid jostling his fragile passenger. When they reached the farm, Walter was tending to the chickens. He looked up as Max approached, his eyes widening in surprise at the sight of the kitten. "Well, I'll be," Walter said, setting down his feed bucket. He crouched to get a closer look at the kitten, who was still perched on Max's back. "Where'd you find this little one, Max?" Max wagged his tail proudly, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Walter gently lifted the kitten off Max's back, cradling it in his hands. The kitten looked up at him with wide, trusting eyes, as if sensing that it was finally safe. Walter examined the kitten carefully, noting its thin frame and the scratches on its paws. "You've had a rough time, haven't you, little one?" he murmured. He carried the kitten inside the farmhouse, with Max trotting happily beside him. Inside, Walter prepared a warm bed for the kitten using an old blanket. He poured some milk into a shallow dish and placed it nearby. The kitten hesitated at first, its instincts still on high alert. But the sight of Max lying nearby, watching over it protectively, gave it the courage to approach the dish. It lapped up the milk eagerly, its tiny body trembling with relief. Over the next few days, the kitten began to recover. It grew stronger, its fur regained its softness, and its playful nature started to emerge. It followed Max around the farm, batting at his tail and climbing onto his back whenever it got tired. Max, ever patient and gentle, became its guardian and playmate. Walter watched their bond with a smile. It warmed his heart to see how Max had taken the kitten under his wing, or paw as it were. The two were inseparable, their unlikely friendship a testament to the kindness and loyalty that animals often show. As time passed, the kitten grew into a healthy, confident young cat. It no longer trembled with fear or hunger, thanks to Max's intervention and Walter's care. And while the farm remained the same quiet, peaceful place it had always been, it now had an extra touch of warmth, a reminder that even in the face of abandonment, kindness could create a new beginning. Max and the kitten quickly became an inseparable duo, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. They spent their time exploring the farm together, chasing butterflies in the fields and napping under the shade of the old oak tree. Wherever Max went, the kitten followed, its tiny paws padding eagerly behind him. And whenever the kitten felt tired, Max would crouch down, allowing it to climb onto his back for a ride. Walter often found himself smiling at their antics. He was amazed by Max's patience and gentleness, and he marveled at how the kitten's playful energy had brought new life to the farm. The once timid kitten had become fearless, climbing onto the backs of goats and darting between the legs of the chickens, much to their annoyance. But no matter what trouble the kitten got into, Max was always there to keep it safe. One day, while Walter was mending a fence at the far end of the property, he noticed Max and the kitten wandering toward the edge of the woods. Walter called out to them, but they were too engrossed in their exploration to hear him. Though Walter trusted Max to look after the kitten, he couldn't shake the feeling that they might run into trouble. The woods were home to wild animals, and the thought of the tiny kitten facing any danger made Walter uneasy. As Max and the kitten ventured deeper into the woods, the air grew cooler and the sounds of the farm faded away. The kitten darted ahead, its curiosity leading it to investigate every rustling leaf and fallen branch. Max followed closely, his ears perked and his nose sniffing the air for any signs of danger. The pair soon stumbled upon a small stream, its clear water glistening in the dappled sunlight. The kitten pawed at the water, fascinated by the way it sparkled and flowed. Max watched with amusement, his tail wagging as he drank from the stream. The peaceful moment was interrupted by a sudden rustling in the bushes nearby. Max's ears shot up, and he positioned himself protectively in front of the kitten. A low growl rumbled in his throat as he stared at the bushes, his body tense and ready to defend his tiny companion. The kitten, sensing Max's unease, pressed itself against his side, its wide eyes fixed on the bushes. Out of the foliage emerged a fox, its sleek red coat shimmering in the sunlight. The fox paused, its sharp eyes narrowing as it sized up Max and the kitten. For a moment, the two animals locked gazes, their instincts guiding their every move. The fox took a cautious step forward, its nose twitching as it caught the scent of the kitten. Max let out a warning bark, his deep voice echoing through the woods. The fox hesitated, its ears flattening against its head. It seemed to weigh its options, deciding whether the potential meal was worth the risk of challenging Max. The standoff lasted only a few seconds, but to Max and the kitten, it felt like an eternity. Finally, the fox let out a huff and retreated into the bushes, disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. Max relaxed his stance, his growl fading into silence. He turned to the kitten, nuzzling it gently to reassure it that the danger had passed. The kitten let out a soft mew, its trust in Max unshaken. With the fox gone, Max and the kitten continued their exploration, though Max remained on high alert. He guided the kitten away from the stream and back toward the safety of the farm, his protective instincts stronger than ever. When they returned, Walter was waiting for them at the edge of the woods, his hands on his hips and a look of relief on his face. "There you are," he said, crouching down to greet them. "You had me worried, you know." Max wagged his tail, his eyes shining with pride as if to say, "Don't worry, I kept us safe." Walter chuckled and scratched behind Max's ears, grateful for the dog's unwavering loyalty. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned shades of orange and pink, Walter sat on the porch with Max and the kitten at his feet. He watched as the two friends curled up together, their bond a testament to the power of kindness and love. Though the kitten had been abandoned and left to face the world alone, it had found a family in Max and Walter, a family that would never let it face another day without care and protection. And so, the farm remained a haven not just for Max and the kitten but for any creature in need. Walter knew that as long as Max was there, the farm would always be a place where love and compassion flourished. And the kitten, once fragile and afraid, grew into a confident and playful companion, a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness could change a life forever. Months passed, and the kitten had become a permanent part of the farm's vibrant ecosystem. What had once been a scared and fragile creature had blossomed into a playful, curious, and confident young cat. Its glossy fur gleamed in the sunlight, and its playful antics never failed to bring a smile to Walter's face. Max, ever the loyal companion, remained the kitten's steadfast protector, always keeping an eye on it as they roamed the farm together. The bond between Max and the kitten grew deeper with each passing day. They had developed a unique way of communicating. Max would let out short, gentle barks to signal something, and the kitten would respond with its soft meows. They seemed to understand each other perfectly, as if they spoke a language all their own. One crisp autumn morning, Walter decided to take Max and the kitten on a walk through the fields that bordered the farm. The golden leaves crunched beneath their feet as they wandered through the tall grass, the cool breeze carrying the earthy scent of the changing season. The kitten trotted alongside Max, its tiny paws barely making a sound on the ground. As they reached a clearing near the edge of the woods, Walter noticed something unusual. A small, dilapidated shed he hadn't seen before. It looked like it had been abandoned for years, its wooden walls warped and its roof partially caved in. Curious, Walter approached the shed, Max and the kitten following close behind. Inside the shed, they found a surprising sight. A nest of baby birds had fallen from the rafters onto the floor. The tiny creatures chirped helplessly, their delicate bodies trembling with fear. Walter crouched down to examine them, his heart aching at the sight. "We can't leave them like this," Walter said, his voice filled with concern. He gently scooped up the baby birds and placed them in his hat to keep them safe. Max watched intently, his tail wagging slightly as if he understood the importance of what Walter was doing. The kitten, curious as ever, stretched up on its hind legs to get a better look at the birds. Back at the farm, Walter fashioned a makeshift nest for the birds using straw and an old basket. He placed it in a safe spot in the barn, away from any potential predators. Max and the kitten watched as Walter carefully placed the baby birds inside the basket, their chirps growing quieter as they settled into their new nest. Over the next few weeks, Walter cared for the baby birds, feeding them and ensuring they stayed warm. Max and the kitten took on the role of guardians, often sitting near the basket and keeping watch. The kitten, ever playful, would gently bat at the straw, earning a warning growl from Max to remind it to be careful. As the birds grew stronger and began to test their wings, the kitten seemed to take a particular interest in their progress. It would sit by the basket, its wide eyes following the bird's every movement. Max, on the other hand, seemed content to lie nearby, his presence enough to keep the birds calm. The day finally came when the birds were ready to leave the nest. Walter carried the basket outside and placed it on the ground, allowing the birds to hop out and stretch their wings. Max and the kitten watched as the birds took their first tentative flights, their tiny wings flapping furiously as they lifted off the ground. Winter gradually gave way to spring, and the farm blossomed with life. The once barren fields were now filled with vibrant green grass and colorful wildflowers. Birds chirped joyfully, their songs echoing through the air as the sun warmed the land. The farm animals, too, seemed to revel in the arrival of spring, their playful energy infectious. Max and the kitten often spent their afternoons lounging in the shade of the old oak tree, watching the world around them with contentment. They had become the heart of the farm, their bond a source of inspiration and joy for Walter. But their story wasn't over yet. Fate had another challenge in store for them. One sunny afternoon, as Walter was working in the barn, he noticed Max and the kitten acting strangely. Max's ears were perked, and his tail was stiff as he sniffed the air intently. The kitten, too, seemed alert, its tiny nose twitching as it followed Max's lead. Something had caught their attention. "What is it, boy?" Walter asked, wiping his hands on his overalls as he walked over to them. Max let out a low bark, his eyes focused on the edge of the woods. Walter's brow furrowed as he followed Max's gaze. "You smell something out there?" Max barked again, more urgently this time, and began trotting toward the woods. The kitten, ever the loyal companion, followed closely, its little legs working hard to keep up. Walter grabbed his hat and followed them, curiosity piqued. As they ventured into the woods, the air grew cooler, and the sounds of the farm faded away. The trio moved cautiously, Max leading the way with his keen nose guiding him. The kitten stayed close, its wide eyes darting around as it took in the unfamiliar surroundings. Walter kept a watchful eye on them, his instincts telling him to be prepared for anything. They soon came upon a small clearing where they found the source of Max's concern. A young deer was tangled in a mess of old wire fencing, its legs caught and unable to move. The poor creature thrashed weakly, its eyes wide with fear and pain. Walter's heart sank at the sight. "Oh, you poor thing," he murmured, stepping forward carefully. Max stood guard, his posture calm but alert, while the kitten stayed close to Walter's side, sensing the tension in the air. Walter knelt beside the deer, speaking to it in soothing tones as he assessed the situation. The wire was tightly wrapped around its legs, and the deer's struggles had only made it worse. Walter reached into his pocket and pulled out a pair of wire cutters, his hands steady as he began to work. "It's okay," Walter said softly. "We're here to help." Max stood close, his presence reassuring to both Walter and the deer. The kitten, though curious, seemed to understand the gravity of the situation and stayed quiet. Walter worked quickly but carefully, cutting through the wire and freeing the deer's legs. Once the last piece of wire was removed, the deer lay still for a moment, as if processing what had just happened. "There you go," Walter said with a gentle smile. "You're free now." The deer slowly got to its feet, testing its legs before taking a tentative step forward. It turned to look at Walter, Max, and the kitten, its eyes filled with what Walter could only describe as gratitude. Then, with a graceful leap, it disappeared into the woods, its form blending seamlessly with the trees. Walter let out a sigh of relief, patting Max on the head. "Good job, buddy," he said. Max wagged his tail, his eyes gleaming with pride. The kitten let out a soft meow, nuzzling against Walter's leg as if to say, "We did it." As they made their way back to the farm, Walter couldn't help but feel a deep sense of fulfillment. Once again, Max and the kitten had played a part in making the world a little kinder, a little brighter. And as they returned to the warmth and safety of the farmhouse, Walter knew that their story was far from over. Together, they would continue to face whatever challenges came their way, their bond unbreakable and their hearts full of love. The farm, nestled in its peaceful corner of the world, had become a sanctuary not just for animals in need, but for Walter as well. It was a place where kindness thrived, where bonds were formed, and where every life, no matter how small or fragile, was valued. And as long as Max and the kitten were by his side, Walter knew that his little farm would always be a beacon of hope and compassion. As the days passed, Walter often reflected on the events that had unfolded with young Liam. It wasn't the first time Max and the kitten had come to the rescue, and Walter suspected it wouldn't be the last. The bond they shared went beyond mere companionship. It was a testament to the unwavering loyalty and empathy that animals could possess. Their actions had brought warmth to the farm and reinforced Walter's belief that kindness, no matter how small, had the power to change lives. Life returned to its usual rhythm on the farm. The animals went about their days, and Max and the kitten resumed their adventures. Winter was slowly giving way to spring, and the first signs of new life were beginning to appear. Buds formed on the trees, and the once snow-covered fields were now dotted with tiny patches of green. One morning, as the sun rose over the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, Walter decided to take Max and the kitten on a walk to a nearby meadow. It was one of Walter's favorite spots, a tranquil place where wildflowers bloomed in abundance and the distant sound of a babbling brook added to the serenity. Max wagged his tail excitedly as Walter grabbed his coat, and the kitten followed, its tiny paws quick and eager. The journey to the meadow was peaceful. The trio walked along a dirt path that wound through the farm and into the woods, the morning light casting long shadows across the ground. Max led the way, his nose occasionally dipping to the ground to investigate an interesting scent, while the kitten trotted alongside him, pausing now and then to swat at a stray leaf or twig. When they reached the meadow, Walter took a deep breath, savoring the fresh, crisp air. The field stretched out before them, a sea of green punctuated by vibrant wildflowers swaying gently in the breeze. Max bounded ahead, his energy infectious as he darted through the grass. The kitten, not one to be left behind, chased after him, its tiny body leaping and bounding with surprising agility. Walter found a spot to sit beneath a tree, his back against the trunk as he watched Max and the kitten play. The two of them seemed inseparable, their bond as strong as ever. Max would occasionally slow down to check on the kitten, ensuring it wasn't too far behind, while the kitten would meow in protest if Max strayed too far ahead. As they played, a soft rustling sound caught Walter's attention. His eyes scanned the meadow, searching for the source of the noise. At first, he saw nothing, but then he noticed a small, trembling figure partially hidden in the tall grass. It was a fawn, its delicate frame barely visible amidst the greenery. The fawn's wide, frightened eyes locked onto Walter, and it froze, its body tense with fear. Max, sensing something amiss, stopped playing and turned toward the fawn. His tail wagged slowly, and he let out a low, friendly bark, as if trying to reassure the frightened creature. The kitten followed Max's gaze and tilted its head in curiosity, its tiny paws inching forward cautiously. Walter rose to his feet and approached the fawn slowly, his movements deliberate and non-threatening. The fawn remained still, its small body trembling. As Walter got closer, he noticed a shallow cut on the fawn's leg, likely from a run-in with a thorny bush. He knelt down a few feet away, his voice soft and soothing. "It's okay, little one. We're here to help." Max and the kitten sat a short distance away, their presence calm and reassuring. Walter carefully reached out, allowing the fawn to sniff his hand. After a moment of hesitation, the fawn seemed to relax slightly, its breathing slowing as it realized Walter meant no harm. With gentle hands, Walter lifted the fawn and cradled it against his chest. The kitten meowed softly, as if offering words of encouragement, while Max trotted beside Walter, his protective instincts kicking in. They made their way back to the farm, the fawn nestled securely in Walter's arms. Back at the barn, Walter cleaned the fawn's wound and wrapped it with a bandage. The fawn remained calm, its trust in Walter, Max, and the kitten growing with each passing moment. Walter prepared a small bed of hay for the fawn to rest on and placed a bowl of water nearby. Over the next few days, the fawn began to recover under Walter's care. It grew stronger, its once timid demeanor giving way to cautious curiosity. Max and the kitten, as always, stayed by its side, their presence a source of comfort. The kitten, ever playful, would bat at the fawn's tail, while Max ensured that it felt safe at all times. As the fawn regained its strength, Walter knew it wouldn't be long before it was ready to return to the wild. The thought filled him with a mix of pride and sadness. Pride in having helped the fawn heal, and sadness at the thought of saying goodbye. The day finally came when the fawn was strong enough to leave. Walter led it to the edge of the woods, Max and the kitten by his side. The fawn hesitated for a moment, its wide eyes looking back at Walter and its newfound friends. Walter crouched down and gave the fawn a gentle pat. "You're going to be okay," he said softly. The fawn nuzzled Walter's hand before turning and bounding into the woods. Max let out a soft bark, as if saying farewell, while the kitten meowed quietly, its gaze following the fawn until it disappeared from view. As they walked back to the farmhouse, Walter couldn't help but feel a sense of fulfillment. Max and the kitten had once again played a vital role in helping a creature in need, their compassion and loyalty shining through. The farm, with its humble barn and sprawling fields, continued to be a sanctuary, a place where kindness and love always found a way to thrive. Days turned into weeks, and life on the farm continued its peaceful rhythm. Max and the kitten remained the heart of the farm, their bond bringing an unmatched warmth to Walter's days. Whether it was the kitten playfully climbing onto Max's back or Max patiently guiding the kitten on their adventures, their companionship was a constant reminder of the beauty of unlikely friendships. One morning, as Walter was tending to the chickens, he heard a series of faint, distressed meows coming from the barn. Concerned, he hurried inside, with Max and the kitten following closely behind. The sound grew louder as they approached a stack of hay bales, and Walter realized it was coming from behind them. Max immediately sprang into action, sniffing around the haystack with determination. His sharp senses led him to a narrow gap between the bales, where the faint cries were coming from. The kitten, sensing the urgency, joined Max, its tiny paws pawing at the hay. Walter carefully moved the bales aside, revealing a small, scruffy kitten barely older than a few weeks. Its fur was dirty, and it trembled with fear and cold. Walter's heart ached at the sight of the tiny creature, so fragile and vulnerable. "Looks like we've got another little one in need," Walter said softly, reaching out to scoop up the kitten. It meowed weakly, its tiny body shivering in his hands. Max wagged his tail gently, his eyes filled with concern, while the kitten nuzzled the new arrival, as if welcoming it into their family. Walter carried the new kitten into the house, placing it in a warm, soft blanket by the fireplace. He fetched a small bottle of milk and carefully fed the kitten, its tiny mouth latching onto the bottle with surprising eagerness. Max and the older kitten watched closely, their protective instincts kicking in as they hovered nearby. Over the next few days, the new kitten began to regain its strength. It grew more comfortable in its new surroundings, and its timid nature started to fade. Max and the older kitten took the newcomer under their wing, guiding it around the farm and teaching it the ropes. The sight of the three of them together brought endless joy to Walter, who marveled at how quickly they had formed a bond. The new kitten's playful energy added a new dynamic to the farm. It would chase after Max's tail, pounce on the older kitten, and even attempt to climb onto Walter's lap whenever he sat down. Max, ever patient, seemed to enjoy the new kitten's antics, while the older kitten took on a nurturing role, often grooming the newcomer and keeping it out of trouble. One sunny afternoon, as Walter was repairing a section of the fence, he noticed the three companions venturing toward the edge of the property. He watched with a smile as Max led the way, the two kittens trotting along behind him. Their adventurous spirit reminded Walter of how much the farm had changed since Max brought the first kitten home. The trio's journey led them to a small stream that ran along the edge of the property. The older kitten, now confident and curious, leapt onto a rock in the middle of the stream, its tiny paws steady as it balanced on the slippery surface. The younger kitten, not to be outdone, followed suit, its playful energy driving it to explore every nook and cranny. Max kept a watchful eye on the kittens, his protective instincts always on high alert. When the younger kitten slipped on the wet rock and landed in the shallow water, Max was there in an instant, nudging it gently back to safety. The kitten meowed in protest, more startled than hurt, and Max let out a soft bark as if to say, "Be more careful next time." Walter chuckled as he watched from a distance, his heart swelling with pride and affection. Max and the kittens had brought so much life and joy to the farm, transforming it into a place of love and compassion. Their bond was a testament to the power of kindness, and Walter knew that as long as they were together, the farm would always be a haven for those in need. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the fields, Walter called out to Max and the kittens. They came bounding toward him, their energy undiminished despite the long day of adventures. Walter knelt down to greet them, his hands ruffling Max's fur and scratching the kittens behind their ears. "Let's head home," he said, his voice filled with warmth. Together, they made their way back to the farmhouse, their silhouettes outlined against the vibrant colors of the setting sun. It was a perfect ending to another day on the farm, a place where love, loyalty, and kindness always found a way to shine. The farm settled into a peaceful rhythm as the days continued, with Max and the two kittens becoming an inseparable trio. The younger kitten, now fully recovered and full of energy, followed its older sibling's lead, mimicking its every move and often instigating playful chases around the barn. Max, ever patient and watchful, remained their steadfast guardian, ensuring their safety no matter where their adventures took them. Walter often found himself marveling at how much the two kittens had grown, both in size and confidence. Their playful antics brought a new sense of vitality to the farm, and their bond with Max served as a constant reminder of the compassion that had brought them together. Whether they were exploring the fields, napping under the oak tree, or chasing butterflies through the garden, the trio was a picture of harmony and friendship. One particularly warm afternoon, Walter decided to introduce the kittens to the farm's other animals. The chickens clucked curiously as the kittens approached, their tiny noses twitching as they sniffed the air. The older kitten, ever brave, stepped forward to investigate, its wide eyes taking in the flurry of feathers. The younger kitten followed hesitantly, staying close to Max for reassurance. The goats, more curious than cautious, approached the kittens with gentle sniffs. One particularly bold goat nudged the younger kitten with its nose, causing the tiny feline to tumble backward. Max barked softly in response, his protective instincts kicking in, but the kitten quickly righted itself and let out a tiny, defiant meow. Walter couldn't help but chuckle at the scene, his heart warmed by the kitten's growing confidence. As the weeks went on, the kittens became more comfortable around the other animals, often napping alongside the goats or playfully chasing the chickens, much to their dismay. Max, ever the patient guardian, kept a watchful eye on them, ensuring they never strayed too far or got into trouble. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned shades of orange and pink, Walter sat on the porch with Max and the kittens by his side. The farm was quiet, the only sounds being the distant chirping of crickets and the gentle rustle of the breeze through the trees. Walter sipped his tea, a sense of contentment washing over him as he watched the trio curled up together at his feet. Life on the farm had become something truly special. What had once been a quiet, solitary existence had been transformed into a vibrant sanctuary, a place where creatures in need found love, safety, and a chance to thrive. Walter knew that it was thanks to Max and his incredible heart that this transformation had taken place. The loyal dog had not only brought the kittens into their lives but had also taught Walter the true meaning of compassion and connection. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Walter leaned down to scratch Max behind the ears, his voice soft and filled with gratitude. "You're a good boy, Max," he said. "The best." Max wagged his tail in response, his warm eyes shining with the love and loyalty that had defined his life on the farm. The kittens, now fast asleep, purred softly, their tiny bodies nestled against Max's side. In that moment, Walter knew that the farm would always be a place of hope and kindness, a haven for all creatures, big and small. And as long as Max and the kittens were by his side, he knew that the farm's legacy of love would continue to grow, touching the lives of everyone who called it home. Continuing with the story, the days following Liam's rescue brought a sense of renewed energy to the farm. Walter couldn't stop marveling at how Max and the kitten had worked together to protect and comfort the young boy. It seemed as though the two animals shared an unspoken understanding, a bond that allowed them to act with perfect synchronicity in moments of crisis. Walter's heart swelled with pride every time he thought about it. The story of Max and the kitten's heroism spread quickly through the nearby town. Neighbors and strangers alike came to visit the farm, bringing treats and toys for Max and the kitten as tokens of appreciation. Children loved hearing the tale of how a brave dog and a tiny kitten had come to the aid of a lost boy, and many of them would gather around Walter on the porch to listen as he recounted the story with a twinkle in his eye. Max, ever humble, took the attention in stride, wagging his tail politely and allowing the children to pet him. The kitten, on the other hand, seemed to revel in the newfound fame. It would climb onto Walter's lap and meow loudly, as if reminding everyone that it had played a crucial role in the rescue. The children adored the kitten's playful nature, and they often brought it small toys to bat around. As the weeks passed, winter deepened, and the farm transformed into a snowy wonderland. The fields were blanketed in white, and icicles hung from the edges of the barn. Despite the cold, the farm remained a bustling haven of activity. Max and the kitten continued their daily explorations, their footprints leaving small trails through the snow. One afternoon, as Walter was chopping firewood near the edge of the farm, he noticed Max and the kitten wandering toward the woods again. He called out to them, but they seemed intent on their mission, their noses to the ground as they followed an invisible trail. Walter, curious but not overly concerned, decided to let them explore. He knew Max would keep the kitten safe. The pair ventured deeper into the woods, the towering trees casting long shadows over the snowy ground. Max's sharp senses guided them as they followed the faint scent of something unusual. The kitten trotted close behind, its tiny paws crunching softly in the snow. Though it had grown more confident, it still relied on Max for reassurance, glancing up at him whenever the rustling of leaves or the snap of a twig startled it. Eventually, they came upon a small clearing where the snow had been disturbed, as if by the thrashing of an animal. In the center of the clearing lay a young deer, its leg caught in a hunter's abandoned trap. The deer's eyes were wide with fear, and it let out soft, plaintive cries as it struggled to free itself. Max approached the deer cautiously, his body language calm and non-threatening. He sniffed at the trap, his keen nose picking up the metallic scent of the rusted iron. The deer flinched at first, its instincts urging it to flee, but the pain in its leg kept it rooted in place. Max let out a low whine, as if to say, "It's okay. I'm here to help." The kitten, curious as ever, crept closer, its small body low to the ground. It seemed to sense the deer's distress, and it let out a soft meow, its voice gentle and comforting. The deer turned its gaze toward the kitten, its trembling body beginning to relax ever so slightly. Max nudged the trap with his nose, trying to understand how it worked. He pawed at the snow around it, revealing more of the rusty mechanism. The kitten watched intently, its wide eyes fixed on Max's every move. Though it was too small to help physically, its presence seemed to calm the deer, giving it the strength to endure. Walter, who had decided to check on Max and the kitten, arrived at the clearing just in time to see what was happening. His heart ached at the sight of the injured deer, and he quickly knelt beside it. "You found another one in need, haven't you, Max?" he said, his voice filled with admiration. With Max's help, Walter carefully pried the trap open, freeing the deer's injured leg. The deer flinched as the trap released its grip, but it didn't try to run. It seemed to understand that it was in the presence of friends. Walter examined the wound, his experienced hands gentle as he cleaned it with snow to stop the bleeding. "We'll get you fixed up," Walter said softly. His words meant as much for the deer as for Max and the kitten. He fashioned a makeshift splint using sticks and a piece of cloth from his pocket, securing it around the deer's leg. Max stayed close, his warm presence providing comfort to the frightened animal, while the kitten perched on Walter's shoulder, observing the process with quiet curiosity. Once the splint was in place, Walter stepped back, giving the deer space to adjust to its newfound freedom. The deer tested its leg tentatively, its movements slow and cautious. Max let out an encouraging bark, and the deer's ears twitched in response. It took a few shaky steps, then paused to look at Max, Walter, and the kitten, as if to say thank you. With a final glance at its rescuers, the deer limped off into the woods, its steps growing steadier with each passing moment. Walter watched until it disappeared from sight, a sense of fulfillment washing over him. He turned to Max and the kitten, a proud smile spreading across his face. "You two have a way of finding those in need, don't you?" he said. Max wagged his tail, his eyes shining with satisfaction, while the kitten let out a cheerful meow. Together, they made their way back to the farmhouse, their bond stronger than ever. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the snowy fields in a warm, golden light, Walter couldn't help but feel grateful for the two unlikely heroes who had brought so much love and purpose into his life. In the days that followed, the farm seemed to radiate an even greater sense of warmth and camaraderie. Max and the kitten had earned a reputation as the farm's protectors, not only among the animals but also in the surrounding community. News of their latest act of kindness, helping the injured deer, spread quickly, bringing even more visitors to the farm. Neighbors would stop by with treats for the pair, and children would eagerly ask Walter to recount the story of Max and the kitten's adventures. Despite the growing attention, life on the farm remained grounded and simple. Max continued his role as the farm's watchful guardian, while the kitten, now a confident young cat, explored every nook and cranny of their shared world. Together, they maintained a balance of mischief and responsibility, their bond an unshakable constant in their ever-changing surroundings. One crisp morning, as the frost glittered on the fields and the first hints of spring lingered in the air, Walter decided to take Max and the kitten for a walk along the riverbank that bordered the farm. The water, though partially frozen, sparkled in the sunlight, its gentle flow accompanied by the soft rustling of the reeds. Max bounded ahead, his tail wagging as he sniffed the ground, while the kitten trotted close behind, its small paws leaving delicate prints in the snow. Walter followed at a leisurely pace, his hands tucked into the pockets of his coat. It was a peaceful scene, the kind that reminded Walter of the simple joys of life on the farm. As they walked, Max suddenly stopped in his tracks, his ears perking up and his nose twitching. The kitten, sensing his alertness, paused as well, tilting its head in curiosity. Walter caught up to them, his brow furrowing as he followed Max's gaze toward a cluster of bushes near the water's edge. "What is it, Max?" Walter asked, his voice low but curious. Max let out a soft bark, his body tensing as he stepped closer to the bushes. The kitten followed cautiously, its tail flicking with anticipation. Walter moved carefully, his boots crunching on the frosty ground as he approached the spot. Peering into the bushes, they found a small, shivering figure, a young duckling, separated from its flock and struggling to stay warm. Its tiny body trembled, and its soft chirps were barely audible over the gentle sound of the river. Walter's heart ached at the sight, and he knelt down to get a better look. "Well, would you look at that?" he said softly. "Another one in need of a little help." Max approached the duckling slowly, his head low and his movements gentle. The kitten watched from a short distance, its wide eyes filled with curiosity and concern. Max nudged the duckling lightly with his nose, his warm breath causing it to stir. The duckling let out a faint chirp, its tiny eyes opening to meet Max's gaze. Walter carefully scooped up the duckling, cradling it in his hands. "You're in good hands now," he murmured, his voice soothing. He turned to Max and the kitten, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Let's get this little one back to the farm." Back at the farmhouse, Walter prepared a warm spot for the duckling near the wood stove. He lined a small basket with soft cloth and placed the duckling inside, ensuring it was safe and comfortable. Max and the kitten sat nearby, their eyes fixed on the tiny creature as it settled into its makeshift nest. The duckling, though weak and disoriented, seemed to draw strength from its new surroundings. It chirped softly, its voice growing stronger as the warmth of the fire seeped into its small body. Max lay down beside the basket, his presence a source of comfort for the duckling, while the kitten perched on the arm of Walter's chair, watching over the scene like a vigilant guardian. Over the following days, the duckling grew stronger, its soft yellow feathers fluffing up as it regained its health. Walter fed it carefully, ensuring it had everything it needed to thrive. Max and the kitten took on the roles of protectors and playmates, their gentle interactions helping the duckling feel at ease. As the duckling grew, it began to explore its surroundings, waddling around the farmhouse with an endearing clumsiness. The kitten, ever curious, would dart ahead, encouraging the duckling to follow, while Max trailed behind, his watchful gaze ensuring their safety. The unlikely trio became a familiar sight on the farm, their bond a testament to the power of compassion and friendship. One sunny afternoon, as the snow began to melt and the first signs of spring emerged, Walter decided it was time to reintroduce the duckling to its natural habitat. He carried the duckling to the riverbank, Max and the kitten by his side. The water, now flowing freely, sparkled in the sunlight, its gentle current inviting the duckling to take its first steps toward independence. Walter placed the duckling at the water's edge, his heart heavy with a mix of pride and sadness. Max and the kitten watched intently, their expressions seemingly understanding the significance of the moment. The duckling hesitated, looking back at its unlikely family before stepping into the cool water. It paddled tentatively at first, its small movements sending ripples across the surface. But as it grew more confident, it began to swim gracefully, its chirps filled with excitement. Walter, Max, and the kitten watched as the duckling joined a nearby flock, its joyful reunion a bittersweet reminder of the fleeting nature of their time together. As they returned to the farmhouse, Walter couldn't help but feel a sense of fulfillment. Though their paths had crossed briefly, the duckling's journey had been a reminder of the importance of kindness and the impact of small acts of compassion. Max and the kitten, with their unwavering loyalty and gentle hearts, had once again shown that even the unlikeliest of friendships could leave a lasting mark on the world. Back at the farm, the familiar routine resumed, yet the memory of the duckling lingered like a warm glow. Walter often glanced at Max and the kitten, marveling at how naturally they had accepted their roles as caretakers and protectors. Their kindness wasn't just reserved for the farm animals but extended to any creature that crossed their path, big or small. The kitten had grown considerably since its arrival on the farm, its playful energy now complemented by a sense of confidence and curiosity. It no longer hesitated to venture into the fields or woods, always keeping Max within sight. Meanwhile, Max remained the steadfast guardian, his keen senses and gentle demeanor ensuring that the farm stayed a safe haven for all who called it home. One afternoon, as Walter tended to repairs on the barn, Max and the kitten found themselves wandering near the old oak tree at the edge of the property. The tree, with its sprawling branches and thick trunk, had always been a favorite spot for the two friends. They often spent hours beneath its shade, the kitten chasing falling leaves while Max lay nearby, basking in the tranquility. As they approached the tree, Max's nose twitched, picking up an unusual scent. He sniffed the air, his ears perking up as he detected something out of place. The kitten noticed Max's change in demeanor and followed his lead, its sharp eyes scanning the ground for clues. Beneath the tree, they found a small hedgehog, curled tightly into a ball. The tiny creature was trembling, its spines quivering with each labored breath. It had a small wound on its side, and its movements were sluggish. Max lowered his head, letting out a soft whine as he gently nudged the hedgehog with his nose. The kitten crouched beside Max, its wide eyes filled with concern. It let out a soft meow, as if to reassure the hedgehog that it was safe. The hedgehog uncurled slightly, revealing its small, frightened face. It seemed to sense the good intentions of its unlikely rescuers, relaxing just enough to allow Max and the kitten to examine it more closely. Max barked softly, signaling for Walter. Though Walter couldn't hear them from the barn, Max remained determined. He gently picked up the hedgehog in his mouth, careful not to hurt it, and began making his way back to the farmhouse. The kitten followed closely, its small body darting ahead to clear the path for Max. When they reached the farmhouse, Walter looked up in surprise. "What have you found this time, Max?" he asked, setting down his tools and hurrying over to them. Max carefully placed the hedgehog at Walter's feet, stepping back to allow him to take a closer look. Walter knelt down, his experienced hands gently cradling the hedgehog. He examined the wound, noting that it wasn't too deep but still required care. "You've done it again," Walter said with a smile, his voice filled with admiration. "You've brought me another one to look after." He carried the hedgehog inside, placing it on a soft towel near the fireplace. The kitten climbed onto the chair beside it, watching intently as Walter cleaned and dressed the wound. Max lay nearby, his warm presence a source of comfort for the frightened creature. Over the next few days, the hedgehog began to recover under Walter's care. It grew stronger, its small body no longer trembling with fear or exhaustion. The kitten often curled up beside it, offering warmth and companionship, while Max kept a watchful eye from a short distance. The unlikely trio formed a bond, their gentle interactions a testament to the healing power of kindness. As spring arrived and the days grew warmer, the hedgehog was ready to return to the wild. Walter carried it back to the old oak tree, Max and the kitten by his side. He placed the hedgehog at the base of the tree, watching as it sniffed the air and began to explore its surroundings. Max and the kitten watched quietly, their expressions calm and content. They seemed to understand that their role as protectors had come to an end, and it was time for the hedgehog to continue its journey on its own. The hedgehog paused for a moment, looking back at them as if to say thank you, before disappearing into the underbrush. Walter patted Max on the head, his voice soft and filled with pride. "You've got a heart of gold, Max," he said. "And you, little one," he added, turning to the kitten, "you're turning into quite the guardian yourself." As they walked back to the farmhouse, Walter couldn't help but reflect on the remarkable bond between Max and the kitten. Together, they had created a sanctuary where kindness and compassion thrived, touching the lives of every creature they encountered. It was a reminder that even the smallest acts of love could ripple outward, creating a world where no one was left behind. And as the sun set on the peaceful farm, Walter knew that their story was far from over. It was just the beginning of many more adventures to come.